Welcome to the Menstruality Podcast, where we share inspiring conversations about the power of menstrual cycle awareness and conscious menopause. This podcast is brought to you by Red School, where we're training the menstruality leaders of the future. I'm your host, Sophie Jane Hardy, and I'll be joined often by Red School's founders, Alexandra and Sjanie, as well as an inspiring group of pioneers, activists, changemakers, and creatives to explore how you can unashamedly claim the power of the menstrual cycle to activate your unique form of leadership for yourself, your community, and the world. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. It's a menopause conversation today about a topic that comes up a lot in our community, because the truth is that many of us are turning up at menopause feeling stressed, exhausted, overworked, undernourished, and often managing multiple care and work roles and responsibilities simultaneously. And then we can hit this death moment of the menopause initiatory death and rebirth process. The power of the initiation can often be compounded by key relationships ending, bereavement, or other extreme life challenges, and it can all form a kind of perfect storm. Alexandra and Sjanie refer to this as the betrayal phase of menopause, the first of 5 phases of the psychospiritual process of menopause, which they explore in their upcoming course, Menopause, the Great Awakener. And today we're unpacking how the real challenge here is to meet this great betrayal, this great dark night of the soul, and let yourself be undone without annihilating or abandoning yourself. Good morning, you two. It's great to be with you. We have a big conversation coming up. Let's start as we always do with a cycle check-in. And I wonder if, Alexandra, you could kick us off, especially because this is a conversation about menopause. What cycles are you with in this post-menopause day that you're in?
Well, I'm very much affected by the moon cycle at the moment because it's full moon today. And to be honest, sometimes I feel a bit exhausted by this moon. I haven't been able to rest in it, in the energy of it. I've felt the charge through my being. So I'm feeling weary, but also I do feel very expansive and very inside big forces at work. So that's another reason for me to be very present, and I have to be very slowed down today so I can manage these different elements. Yes.
Yeah, I'm also weary. I'm on day 7 of my cycle, but the cycle that I'm most connected to is the sort of creative process I'm in at the moment that is keeping me up late at night.
Oh, no.
Because there's a lot to do, but there's a lot of creative charge coming through me. So I'm also underslept and feeling a bit weary with you there. So we'll see how we go. How about you, Sjanie?
I used to wonder if it was a myth that people stayed awake when it was full moon, but the 3 of us seem to be proving it fact, because I had, also last night. I mean, I was very peaceful when I went to bed, but then ka-ching, and I just felt like I was lying under this like illuminated globe in the sky, and there was no way I was going back to sleep. There was nothing much going on in me, but it was like doing. So I have the weariness of having also been awake. And I'm day 19. And I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but I'm noticing now, as I'm in my late 40s, the influence of the moon is getting stronger on the experience of my cycle. And it's interesting because, we talk about when your menstrual cycle stops, that you can start to kind of pace yourself by the rhythm of the moon. It almost feels like there's this changeover, or this handover, a bit like passing the baton, like from the cycle to the moon, that happens, as one gets closer and closer to menopause. That's what I feel. It's like, oh, I'm getting to know the moon cycle much more strongly now. So I've got that going on, and the moon energy is like, go, go, go. And then my day 19 is quite cynical and tough and discerning and impatient. And I can feel that if I'm not careful and if I'm not going slowly enough, I could be a real pain in the ass at the moment. Alexandra's like quietly nodding away to herself.
Well, let's see where this conversation
Yep.
What an interesting mixture of feelings and states we're bringing to this then. It's reminding me of the experience we had live recently with a lot of women in menopause, which was at this Heart of the Rose Festival, where you two gave this beautiful talk about menopause. And I was watching the women entering the tent, and there was a look of seriousness, a look of weariness, and a real discernment. Like they were striding in with their chairs, with their notebooks. I know where I'm going. I'm going to learn about menopause. There was an atmosphere, and it was striking, and it was incredible to see that. I would say 100 women all squeezed into this very hot tent on a very hot day, to hear about, your teachings on menopause. And there was a very profound moment when you were speaking about the topic that we're going to explore today, which is the betrayal phase of menopause, where this, like a veil of seriousness or like gravity fell over the room to really feel the challenge of this part of the menopause process. Yeah, you remember?
I remember very, very well. Yeah. It's actually something Alexandra and I are very acutely aware of, that when we talk about menopause, really talking about the first phase of menopause, what we call betrayal, is a very delicate dance, because it is the death moment in the death and rebirth process. And it's a lot. It's a very grown up, very serious, very big conversation. And I remember, Alexandra, when we were writing Wise Power, you and I, we had a moment where we sort of, I can't remember if it was a conversation or how it came to be, where we realized we're talking to people in menopause in our book. And they don't want sugarcoating. They don't want fluff. They just want to hear it straight. And so, we're in this very delicate dance of really speaking to that need for someone who's in menopause, just like cut to the chase, just give it to me, versus we all have fragile, delicate egos. We are vulnerable, deep feeling humans, and it's a lot, So in that moment, I think.
And we're tired.
Yeah, and we're tired. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, speaking of the book, maybe I can walk us into this conversation with this quote from the beginning of Wise Power. Can people hear my dog in the background?
I heard a little whimper.
No, he's also weary and, feeling things. So there's a lot of deep feeling. So we'll just let him be present because he needs to stay in the room with me right now. Okay. So it begins with endings. For a while, you're dying. Your everyday socialized self bites the dust, dragging some of the architecture of your life with it. You may find that you want to abandon everyone and everything for a while, including your nearest and dearest. You may feel that nothing is it and have a desire to destroy, get rid of, or walk away from some or all of it. As death seeps in, you'll need to retreat like a caterpillar going into its cocoon. You'll enter a darkness that will scramble all your usual ways of coping and managing life. It's as if, like the caterpillar inside its cocoon, you've turned to mush. You may feel lost or abandoned, or simply want to step off the world for a while. You might wonder, is life really over? Or what was it all about? So you're dying and everything may feel like shit. This is normal. Weirdly, it's the effect of more light, the new life, new knowing, expanded consciousness activating your system. So take heart. You'll have to hang out with the discomfort for a little while. Your everyday self, your ego, can't cope with this light. It's new. It's too much information. Blinded by the light, if you like. but your deep, holy self knows what's happening and what's needed, and that all is just fine. A well of inner peace lies quietly present inside, waiting for you to find it, or to find an ever surer line to it. What does that evoke for you today?
Am I allowed to be moved by my own words?
100%.
Yeah, every word of what's written there is true for me in what I know about what menopause is really about. Yeah, that's what I'm serving, that knowing, that recognition in each woman, each person going through menopause.
And it's what I was present to in this room of women at various stages in the menopause process, but that there definitely were women there who were in this dying phase, who were in this, is life over? What is this all about? Identities being dismantled, this feeling of, betrayal, that they are lost.
You are lost for a while. And it was a very profound moment. And actually, Sjanie, thanks to her day one energy, who was sort of plugged into this deep, deep energy, just paused me, because, of course, I kind of get on a roll when I'm speaking about this. And she sort of put her arm on my knee and sort of slow down. And we just to really mark the moment, to really acknowledge, because it was strong stuff that we were saying. But it must be said, because there are very strong experiences that people are having today, going through menopause, real life death stuff.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a couple of examples from women that I've spoken to on this podcast. So we have an interview coming up with Shamali Ardar, who's the founder of the Awakening Women Institute. And it's actually the third time we're speaking to her about her menopause process. It's a conversation that we published in a couple of weeks. But her experience of betrayal was multi-layered. She tragically lost her son. She went through a divorce, and she went through a total dismantling of her sense of self, which, as she will speak about in the conversation, left her on the bathroom floor, just sobbing, utterly bereft and lost. And luckily, she had the support of people around her to hold her through that experience. And she shares in the conversation what it has alchemized in her and created in her a new capacity for inner mothering and kindness. Yeah, I'm really thinking of her right now and just how wretched this can be.
Yes, I think I want to walk us into this with a little bit of framing as a kind of holding. So menopause is an initiation, and initiations require a challenge. And what an initiation is doing is taking you to a more expanded level of consciousness and therefore responsibility. So you can't just turn up with your same habitual self in this new consciousness. It would fry you. You would, you wouldn't be able to handle it. So we have to go through a workout, a test, and it is on a deep existential level that this test happens, where our very core, we have to really meet our deepest shadow, if you like, of ourselves, and create or claim or step into a new relationship with ourselves. This is a big deal. And it's not named, in our culture. Menopause is not valued as a rite of passage. It is largely just seen as a biological phenomena that we go through, and it is largely pathologized. And so there's no kind of there's no recognition. So therefore, there's no holding for us in this, because it's a real sacred rite of passage. And also, there's been no recognition of proper recognition of how our menstrual cycle is caring for and serving us. Because in fact, menopause is the final chapter in a process that you stepped into at your very first bleed. So you have been, through your menstruating years, you have been building to this moment of readiness and to meet this challenge. And this is what's, to my mind, is meant to be happening. But of course, the menstrual cycle is not valued and cherished and so on, although it's starting to be now. You know, this is the good news. We are making dents in the culture. But basically, people and women are turning up at menopause very undereducated, if you like, in the deep psychospiritual forces at work, and unprepared. And I mean, really, that preparation at its most basic level is, well, they're turning up exhausted and stressed and not nourished in themselves. And it's a kind of perfect storm of not knowing about what's happening, and therefore, and trying to maintain life as normal. And life today is so demanding and stressful, and so we're turning up stressed and exhausted. And often there are other things that come in here, which is that we're dealing with parents that are aging, and we may suddenly have a whole new responsibility there that comes in. It's extraordinary. So these forces all come together, and then we hit the menopause death moment. It's not good. Yes, that's all I can say. And then there's one other element I just want to know, which is that it's extraordinary how life seems to conspire with throwing other things at us. Like other dramatic life events happen. You know, suddenly our partner, our relationship suddenly ends. Now, sometimes we will catalyze that going through menopause, but it may be that our partner catalyzes, or something extreme happens. I know Sjani's story, her son dies, and we know someone else, his son died right as she came to menopause. It sort of feels like suddenly a whole lot of other elements seem to go belly up in one's life, and quite extreme stuff. And yes, all that comes together in this great perfect storm that we call betrayal.
So this death moment, in inverted commas, that you're talking about, Alexandra, is of course not a moment. It's a phase. It's the first phase of menopause, and it can go on for quite some time. I'm just going to read what we've written in Wise Power, which captures something of what you've been speaking to, Alexandra. That this first phase of the menopause initiation is the big one. This is the phase that may hit you most. So for some, the impact can be overwhelming. For others, it might be more subtle. In this phase, you're undone. You moved past all your usual habits, defenses, and distractions to experience what's been suppressed or what is unconscious. And the purpose of this phase is to meet and feel all that is erupting and truly experience the reality of yourself in this moment. And actually, I might go on a little because this takes us to the next piece, which is really important, because this is, of course, an initiatory challenge. And the challenge is to let yourself be undone without annihilating, in other words, rejecting yourself or rejecting anyone else, or without annihilating your entire life, for that matter, in the face of not fully knowing what's going to replace that which you're letting go of. So it's about how to meet this great betrayal and not let it undo you completely, but instead turn it into a radical opening of self-acceptance and self-responsibility. That's no small task, but the rewards are great. For this dark ocean of unknownness contains freedom and fulfillment. It contains the profound opportunity to experience deep belonging to yourself and to life.
Wow. So the fruits are enormous and the challenge is enormous. Yeah.
Yeah, they go together. I'm sort of feeling humbled in the face of this bigness. And I think it's really important to name, and Sjanie said it in that piece, which is that each of us will encounter this phase in our own way. You know, for some, it really is utterly shocking, especially when it's accompanied by death of, or separation from partners or whatever. And also, if you are not well resourced, and, it's resourced in the sense of materially in your life, or physically resourced, you're exhausted. So it's just so important to understand and recognize and accept, and respect the context within which you sit. And so it's crucial you do not compare your experience of menopause to any other being on the planet, but to meet the conditions of your life. And the great task is to dare to trust that the complicated messiness and the imperfection of the life you have lived to date, the highs and the lows, that somehow all of that is the perfect alchemical mix for really stepping into who you are. Now, this is a very, very big ask, but I feel this is utterly foundational for coming to meet this moment of betrayal, that you do not condemn yourself, even as you are condemning yourself. You are judging yourself and you're judging your life, and it's all shit. It's like you have to almost hold a meta mind in the background. Now that sounds very grown up, and you may have glimpses of it. And actually, this is why we need allies as well. These are people, they can't do the work for you, but they hold you in the dignity, the bigger picture. They're a reminder. And I mean, this is the work that postmenopause women can really, really do. Be the witness, the holder, the container, and the educator, this loving educator. So, but knowing about this dying, and that's why our book is so important, because we wrote our book, didn't we, Sjanie? Thinking of it as a companion as you're going through these phases of menopause, so that you can keep coming back to it and reminding yourself, because you're going to forget, and you're going to fall into the darkness. All right. And in saying that, I also want to say, in that darkness, in that breakdown, even as you're facing this onslaught of negativity, perhaps with yourself, or seeing all the negativity in the world, which is what happens, what also happens is you also get flashes of freedom. You get flashes of possibility. It's like you sniff something on the wind, but it's utterly unstable at this time. It's like being slightly drunk almost, I think. And so it's really, really, really crucial with betrayal to slow everything down and to bring as much presence as you can to what you're encountering and to just give it space. You need time and space with yourself just to really meet the reality of what you're experiencing and do, I mean, I even think just journaling the shit out, giving it a home, just rather than just bottling it up and then just reacting to everybody around you. Create some sacred practices for yourself, time out of time, where you can just write and just write it out or scream it out, or go for long walks and yell to God, whatever it takes, but in a way that is sort of honoring of yourself, holding of yourself. I mean, it's not tidy. And what happens at menopause, at betrayal, is key to all the goodness that menopause is trying to deliver you to.
I'm going to pause our conversation for a couple of minutes to invite you to join Alexandra and Sjanie for their upcoming course, Menopause, the Great Awakener. It's for you if you sense there's more to menopause than the collective story dictates, and you're feeling called to reclaim the power of the menopause initiation. So wherever you are in the menopause journey, whatever you're experiencing, you're welcome. As Alexandra and Sjanie share, they invite you to bring the fullness of who you are and the fullness of your experience, however messy, complicated, confusing, uncertain, unknown it might be. All of your experiences hold at their heart a deeper story of power. If you'd like to know more, please join Alexandra and Sjanie for their free event on Wednesday, the 23rd of October, called How Menopause Awakens Your Power. You can register for free at redschoolmenopause.com. And if you're feeling a yes for the course already, you can also join the course right now with an early bird offer at redschoolmenopause.com. You're stirring in me another real life example that we know of a woman who, I'd say she's coming out of betrayal now, but had a very profound experience of betrayal. And she was there at this workshop at Heart of the Rose. It's Claire Dubois from Tree Sisters, a mutual friend. And she had a real burn the house down moment. It was actually quite a funny moment of the workshop because she said, it was only after I'd burnt the whole house down when I read about what you say about make sure that you don't burn the whole house down. Because in Claire's betrayal moment, she left everything that had been deeply important to her for the previous decade. Like she left her role at this organization, and it was a huge, very challenging and messy process. But that can happen here too, right? There can be a desire to just cut away everything and just burn the whole thing down, right?
Yes. So what menopause wants to do is to take you away from the world. I think of it like as Hades seizing Persephone and pulling her down into hell, but down into the earth. It's like menopause is saying, you're coming with me. And so detaching yourself from normal life, and that detachment is what is sort of behind this. What it's a combination of this detachment, and then suddenly all your defenses are falling away, and you're sort of exposed to some kind of bigger forces that you have no idea about, and you can't handle yet. And your process of menopause is learning to handle this bigger dynamic that's trying to come through you. So this combination of just feeling utterly detached and exhausted and these big forces coming through, it just seizes you in the moment, and you just want to go. You just want to get out of here. And it's this walking away from all responsibility. And this is so key, that you are responsible for nobody and no thing. And when it's not understood, and when it's not supported, and therefore you're not pacing it, it can seize you in a very almost violent way, where you just say no. You just you wake up one morning and go, I got to get out of this job, and you write your
letter of resignation.
Yeah, letter of resignation. But you have this kind of devil may care energy that comes in, that really wants to get rid of everything.
And no wonder this provokes immense suffering, because if we look at the context of our world and the culture that we're all living in right now, so there's a cost of living crisis going on. So most, if not all people, cannot leave their jobs right now. Just at the time when they need space is the time when everyone's possibly needing to work more. Like you mentioned, parents getting older, needing more care, maybe children, dependents that are also needing care, bills to pay, mortgages to pay, plus all of the things going on in our society for marginalized communities, and the extra obstacles there are to rest and care and support. So this is a complex situation. You know, we are unsupported on multiple levels to do exactly what our deep soul is calling for and screaming for and yearning for, right?
Exactly, Sophie, exactly, because we can't walk out. And it's that pressure of and then we're not taught about this sacred route of passage we're undergoing.
Yeah.
We just think we're going mad, and we condemn ourselves for not coping, because you won't cope, it's too much. So this is the pressure cooker that people are in, and so no wonder there's so much suffering going on, and symptoms, physical, emotional.
Yeah. And back to a key piece of the quote that you read, Sjanie, and now I'm on page 125 of Wise Power, chapter 16, which is the whole chapter about betrayal, where you go, there's this summary at the beginning where you go through the purpose, the self-care practice, the initiatory challenge, the alchemical capacity, and the gold. So maybe we can walk through those. But what I'm being drawn to right now is this initiatory challenge of being undone without annihilating yourself, others, or your life. So somehow, inside this pressure cooker, we need to not abandon ourselves. So, oh, authors of Wise Power, how on earth do we not abandon ourselves in this darkest hour? How do we do that? What do we lean on? What do we draw on?
What's cooking in me is that I'll let you know once I've been through it. Yeah, and in all seriousness, I think that there's something very good about that to note for ourselves, is that we are all having to discover this for ourselves on the job, in the moment. You can't be like prepared for this, and you can't know how until you discover your way. That's actually what makes this initiatory, is that there's no theory or kind of guideline that is going to be it for you. It is utterly about you and we could say, your relationship with yourself, actually. And I think we've all, whether we've been through menopause or not, I think we've all experienced these moments in our lives where we are facing the impossible. And it's at those moments where we discover something like holy and new in ourselves, that we really dig deep and like claim ourselves or take our own side or just dignify what we're going through. I think that goes such a long way, whether you can change the outer circumstances or not. That's one thing. But the territory we always have sovereignty over is our own inner life and ourselves. And that's actually where the big work is happening when it comes to initiation is, am I going to bring kindness to myself in this moment? Am I going to claim myself? Am I going to choose myself? Yeah, and that I don't think any of us know whether or not we can or will until we face those moments.
Yeah, and perhaps the truth is sometimes we can and sometimes we can't.
Yeah.
Part of the rocky road, like you said, this is a phase, this isn't a moment, this is weeks, months, years.
Yeah. That's a very, very good point. We're actually inside a process, and the good thing about that is that we have time to kind of stabilize in it, because this is a time of great unknown. I mean, I don't know if that word's been mentioned yet in this podcast, but part of the what's happening in this phase that we call betrayal is that everything we've known and loved is being kind of stripped back. We're being de-armored. We're letting go of the roles and the identities we've had, and where that leaves us is in a very, very unknown place. Like, we don't know who we are. We don't really know what we care about anymore, or what we're even doing, or why we're even doing it. And you can hear how that can create such a cesspool for like doubt and self-loathing and shame and real self-criticism. Yeah. Whew. But the unknownness of it and the fact that you're swimming in it for quite some time at least gives us time to acclimatize to not knowing. And I think that's one of the great blessings of menopause, is because it happens over such a long, sustained amount of time. Like, our psyches have time to sort of process what's going on. Yeah.
And perhaps we have time to practice these brilliant self-care practices that you've laid out in this map of a territory that can't be mapped in this book. Because for each of the phases you share the purpose, the self-care practice, the initiatory challenge, and so on. And the self-care practice that we can work with here is to say no to the world and yes to your own needs.
I am so glad I asked you to answer that question, Sjanie, because what you shared is actually, I would have gotten practical, and I will. And, this is something practical, but what you shared was really profound, actually. There is this, the truth is, it's not, this is this thing of, I can't give you the cast iron steps to handle betrayal. You actually have to go into it, into the unknown and meet it for yourself and call up yourself. And you said what's being tested is your relationship with yourself. And that, of course, is a process. And you really emphasize time, Sjanie. And so I'll come to what you've just said in a moment, Sophie. But I do remember my own experience of this phase, and God, feeling so much anger, but anger towards myself, anger towards life, actually. I just felt like a freaking victim. And but really seeing only what I had not done. And, it didn't happen overnight, this process of settling into myself and and so it is a process. You're being tested in your relationship with yourself to ultimately take your own side. And the really important key here to allow this, it's a kind of alchemy, it's an alchemical process, but for that alchemical process to get to work, you have to say no to the world and yes to yourself as more and more. And here is the wonderful thing about menopause. You just organically have this superpower that emerges. Well, you have two, and one of them is the power of no. Honestly, your capacity for saying no will know no bounds. It'll be a no to everything. It'll be out of your mouth before your brain has kicked in, your sort of, or your pleaser, or your whatever other, forces you have, responsible part of you, whatever. It's out of your mouth now. It's those guys are not in charge anymore. There's another force that's bigger that's in charge, and you are going to just be going no, and you will come across possibly as negative and reactive, possibly, especially if you're not sort of pacing yourself enough. And who is pacing themselves enough? None of us. Yes, but you do have an ally on your side. I really want to emphasize that, because what that no is doing, what's behind that no is you claiming space, time and space for yourself. And in this space that you're claiming, that you're searching, that your deep self is searching for, is in the space is no responsibilities, responsibility-free time, so that you can start to feel yourself again. It's actually, betrayal is waking you up. You are actually coming back to life. Even as you feel you are dying, you are actually waking up.
Wow. I feel like that's the kind of sentence I would want to write down and put on my pin board when I'm going through menopause. Even though you feel like you're dying, you're actually waking up. Because that's the kind of bigger knowing that I think we all have. And yet we can become so consumed in our own pain and suffering that we can forget that. So I think having that on your fridge or on your notes board, or on your mirror in your bathroom would probably be very, very helpful. Very helpful. And actually, Alexandra, what you were saying there about the self-care practice made me realize that it's also very helpful just to remember, and this was in that first piece of reading that you did, Sophie Jane, is that when we enter menopause, we're actually being sort of taken into a cocoon. In other words, we're being kind of called into a retreat from the world in order to go through this initiation. So that's a very important piece to remember, that menopause is a retreat time. We talk about it as being an inner winter. And so everything that's happening in this betrayal phase is going to be supported just actually with you knowing that your place right now is not in the world and serving the world and being there for others. Your place right now is tending to yourself and being present with what's erupting and stirring and happening in you. I think just knowing that is really, really helpful, having that kind of piece of permission and recognizing that's right and as it should be, because coming out of our younger years, actually, we've all been in a mode of looking after others and being there for others. So this is a real gear change. It's sort of a real shift in consciousness. But now is the time to make that shift. And when we first used to teach about the phases of menopause, we actually called this first phase, separation. And in many ways, that's a very helpful name because it talks about this need to say no to the world and to separate so that you can create more just psychic space for your own inner life. And in the end, we decided to go with Betrayal because it really captures the initiatory power of this phase. And in fact, whenever we talk about betrayal, the question that always comes up is like, why do you call this phase betrayal? It's like, and actually, maybe that's something we should speak to now, because I think it's quite a shocking word. And it's a very, very strong word. And I think a lot of what we've said now will maybe just kind of be contextualized a bit.
It's a very good point, Sjanie. I hesitated for a long time, but betrayal would not betray me. Was very insistent. I realized I had to step up to the plate and really, it was menopause, I suppose, speaking to me, saying, you've got, this is holy work. Menopause is holy work. And for this holy work to happen, this word betrayal is profound. And so what do we mean by that word betrayal? Well, in the dying, there's betrayal happening on all sorts of levels. You may feel things like being betrayed by life, the promise of your life, the things that you thought would happen, like perhaps you wanted children and that never came about, or, you wanted a certain kind of job and that, a path or a relationship that was never fulfilled. And by the way, you can still have relationships post-menopause, although you can't have children. But in that moment of menopause, it does feel like your life is over, and the things that you had wanted that hadn't been fulfilled or happened, it really hit you, and it can feel like you're betrayed by life. So you do feel like a victim of things. It's like you're feeling really sorry for yourself. You are at the effect of something. Something else has not delivered for you. And so you're feeling betrayed because of that. And you can feel betrayed by the institutions you believed in, because I mentioned this superpower of no. We have another superpower that kicks in at menopause, which is sight. And you suddenly see through things. And an institution you believed in, you suddenly go, oh no, there's all this shit going down. You will feel you might have held hope that the government might still deliver. But you're now realizing no. It's no, you suddenly discover there are no freaking heroes coming on white chargers to save you. So institutions are going to fall off their pedestals. People that you had elevated, oh my God, are they going to crash and burn around you? Absolutely. Yeah. Friendships are going to end. A relationship that you thought was good, you may feel betrayed by your partner because they may go off they're not willing to stay in with the menopause initiation and go through their own change to step up to a new relationship with you. So it can happen on all sorts of levels. Also, your body, it may feel like your body is betraying you. Your body that you took for granted, that always, you always slept, you always had energy, you could just get up and go, and you could push, regardless of, how much sleep you had. Suddenly your body goes, no, I'm not going to do that. And suddenly, that goes from underneath you. So you're encountering all these betrayals where, you're at the effect of something. So you're feeling powerless. And you can't, yes, you're feeling powerless. And this is the work of menopause, of course, to turn this around.
Can I also add in, because this is also really key for many people, is feeling abandoned by the divine, or
Yes, I was.
yeah.
Well, keep going, Sjanie. Yes.
No, you continue.
Well, there are two more things I want to say, which is that, and this is, I think, the toughest thing, and I remember it. I can remember where I was sitting, where I suddenly experienced it, where I felt like the gods and goddesses abandoned me. I'd always had a sense of grace, of something holding me. And then suddenly it was not there. And I felt the utter nothingness of my life. No, and that gave meaning. I felt like I was held by God, divine or something. Yeah. And that abandoned me. And that, I think, is almost the bleakest moment of all, actually. Thank you, Sjanie, for bringing that in. And then there's one other element here. So you feel, and this is the sort of sacred task, really, here. This is the heart of the initiation of menopause, which is that you feel that even God has abandoned you. Now, the big question is, are you going to abandon yourself? And abandoning yourself looks like, oh, it's all fucked. I'm fucked. Why bother? There's nothing, it's hopeless, there's nothing. And by the way, you will feel all that. You will pass through all that. But it's whether you choose to stay there or not. And that's the great work of menopause, and it takes time. And we talk about that. There's a kind of repair phase you have to go through where you just need loads and loads and loads of rest, and you need your brain to shut down, and you just need to do nothing and just rest. And then something starts to shift, so that you're starting to alchemize this betrayal. So it doesn't happen overnight. Really hear me on this, folks. Really, 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 really hear me. So you do pass through that it's all shit and I'm shit, or a version of, because I hope you do have some modicum of holding of yourself. That is my dearest hope, that when you come into menopause, you have done some good inner work, whatever it's been, of care for yourself, and feeling some sense of pride in who you are, and sense of achievement in who you are, and just, a kind of yes towards yourself. That is my greatest hope, that is happening for you before menopause, so that when you hit this betrayal moment in menopause, that there is some modicum of something that can bring you back to yourself. I just want to throw in here, a sense of humor really helps too. Mm-hmm. Because the great sacred work of menopause is not to abandon yourself. And in that act of saying yes to yourself, a whole new cosmos can really take root in you, can really have purchase inside you. The new life, the promise of what you're deeply about can be fulfilled. The meaning of your life with all its messiness, because I didn't have much to say about my life before I came into menopause. There were things, but Sjanie, come in.
Just to pick up from that, Alexandra, so part of this betrayal that you're flirting with in menopause is self-betrayal, which shows up as your own inner critic. That part of you that is judging and shaming and criticizing you. So you're really standing on this knife edge of hearing and meeting that in yourself. And I just want to read a little paragraph from Wise Power on page 141 that speaks to this knife edge moment. So this is a pivotal and dangerous moment. Do you give into this criticism and just let it maul you? Or do you dare to challenge it, question its black and white position and its obsession with success and failure? Do you abandon, that is, betray yourself, or do you finally claim yourself in the face of this criticism? Yeah.
That's the work.
You know, in the Zen tradition, there are those sentences that you sit with and meditate with and reflect on, like a koan. This really feels like one of those. Because what I find myself wanting to do is say, can you wrap a bit more language around what that could look like? But you know, maybe I'm just grasping at straws to, and actually it's an intimate process inside each of us, this claiming of ourselves. It's got different language for each of us.
Yes, I think it has, Sophie. And I think I have two positions I hold around all this with menopause. One is that I want you to be wrapped around with kindness and recognition. I want you to have the information and for the experience to be dignified and for you to understand this process. You're going intellectually have something. And I just want to hold kindness. And then the other position I have is of a real detachment and a kind of, I want to say, a sternness, you know, because I remember someone asking me, she's a colleague and a dear friend, saying, you know, when she was in the bleakest hour, the bleakest, because she had really extreme stuff to confront along with the menopause. And it almost brings tears to my eyes now, thinking about that moment with her. And by the way, she's thriving now. And even as there is this shadow of the loss of her, death of her son in this process of menopause, I remember sitting with her in silence. I just had to be with her, but I could not come up with any words, they would have felt like platitudes. I could not, I didn't want to, I mean, she felt my love, I hope, presence, but there aren't words. This is, you know, I'm sitting there thinking when I'm with women in this place of, I hold them in a place of dignity and deep witness, and it requires a lot. It's a discipline you have when you're post-menopause that you bring that you don't have before menopause, that can hold the sacred space within which they might dare over time to turn to themselves and say yes.
Yeah, so what you're really speaking to there is that this is a rite that each of us must go through on our own.
Yes.
Even as we must have companions, a community, people who witness us in it. Ultimately, it is our work to be done.
Yes, we absolutely need a circle around us. Oh, and we need a circle just to mouth off too. To cry and to rage and to, we need all that. We need the whole gamut.
And speaking of community, we have a community invitation here for anyone at any phase of the menopause process to come and join us for the Great Awakener, which is, we run this every year. Alexandra and Sjanie hold an incredibly potent space, so potent that people have come back year after year after year after year.
So lovely.
There is lifetime access to the live rounds in the group. And it's what, I mean, maybe you can share a few words about it, but it's be it holding you by the hand and walking you through these 5 phases, in, you know, starting with betrayal, which we've explored deeply here, and then the 4 further phases of menopause, together with a community with the support of others who are courageously diving into this initiatory experience, and honoring and dignifying each other in it.
Yeah. And so it's a combination of, I would say, actually just being in circle with others going through this experience and having it held in the way that Alexandra and I are talking about is in and of itself priceless, a very rare thing to find, and just, I feel, what we all need. So there's that piece, but then there are the teachings that give context to your experience, and just having your own experience named and recognized brings a huge amount of soothing and ground to what's happening. But we are also very practical in this program, and this is where we teach and practice the self-care practices for each phase. And we mentioned the one here for betrayal, but what I find really good about this is that whilst this whole experience of the menopause initiation is somewhat nebulous and unnameable, and everyone's having their own unique experience of it, actually, if we all know what we need to do and how we need to care for ourselves, we're creating the conditions to allow the process to work us in the way that it wants to. It's almost like we're allowing what wants to happen. Mm-hmm. And these self-care practices are not like pie in the sky magical thinking stuff. Even a little bit of this goes a really, really long way. You just start to apply these in small ways, you will immediately feel yourself actually being held by menopause. And that is a very different experience to what, many are having. They're inside something now that's guiding them.
And coming back, because you can come back multiple times. Basically, the course travels with you through menopause, so you kind of harvest deeper layers of meaning. And then what's really lovely is your witness to the people who are just starting out, and you can say, yes, I remember that, and this is the place I'm in now. So there's this kind of sharing of experience and hope for others. Oh, I just had to rest. I couldn't get enough of it. It just seemed to go on forever and ever, and now I'm here. It did end.
And the permission that gives,
yes,
to all the others in the space. Okay, well, if she's claiming that much rest, then what can I create in my life? And actually, to bring us to a closing here, I wonder if we could end on something that you named, Sjanie, that rang bells for me, which is you spoke about the shift that we need to make, and you gave permission for those of us especially in this betrayal phase, to prioritize you over all else. And it feels like a really important place to close, and just such an important point to reiterate.
Yes, and yes to that point. That is absolutely key and core to this.
Okay, thank you so much, you two. We're going to carry on having lots of conversations about menopause over the next few weeks on the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to it and to being with you again soon.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for being with us all the way through to the end today. I'm sending love and support to you as you navigate whatever menopause is throwing at you at the moment. And if you'd like some like-minded company, come on over to redschoolmenopause.com and take your seat for Menopause, the Great Awakener, or join Alexandra and Sjanie for their free event, How Menopause Awakens Your Power, on Wednesday, the 23rd of October. You can find out all about it at redschoolmenopause.com. Okay, that's it for this week. I'll be with you again next week. And until then, keep living life according to your own brilliant rhythm.